Okay, so the second panel is called Challenging the Legality of Pushback, a case from Austria. As I mentioned before, Austria successfully challenged this practice done by their authorities, and with us is now Petra from Spielfeld, from Border Crossing Spielfeld, I'm sorry, Gentil, who facilitated this lawsuit against Austrian authorities, and with us is also Petra from PITS, the legal organization that is in charge with asylum procedure in Slovenia, the NGO, and Ahmed Shamieh from Syria, who was one of the plaintiffs against Austria, which means that he was in Austria and then pushed back to Slovenia, where he still is now, and almost pushed back even further, but luckily not. And Matej Kaučić, who will act as interpreter, because by this weird twist of globalization, Ahmed Shamieh from Syria is the only person in this conference who will speak Slovene.
Hi everyone, and thanks for the very, very interesting presentation so far. My name is Petra from Border Crossing Spielfeld. I'm very pleased that Ahmed Shamieh was able to join us today from Ljubljana, originally from Syria. Spielfeld is what is linking us both, because while I am a border citizen living close to the border of Spielfeld and was present with my fellow activists at the border, Ahmed was one of the more than 600,000 people who crossed our common border in 2015 and beginning of 2016. And what happened to Ahmed at the border was what happened to 700 people seeking protection while the Balkan corridor was still open. And Ahmed was one of the people courageous enough to challenge the Austrian police's decision, and who was brave enough to have faith and courage into complete strangers who approached him asking if he wanted to challenge a decision that a country had been taken he was no longer even living in, because after the pushback he was practically forced to apply for asylum in Slovenia. As you might know, people who were pushed back from Austrian authorities were brought into Postojna detention camp and were either given the possibility to apply for asylum in Slovenia or to be deported to Croatia. So just to give you a brief impression how we started with our initiative, this is how the Spielfeld border crossing looked like in September and October 2015. As you see, there are already some tents established in the background, but they weren't even sufficient for people to provide shelter. It was a rather cold October, and people were sleeping on this cement floor in front of the tents. Their main intention was to move on. There were very long waiting hours, because from Spielfeld on, people weren't any longer transported by train, which would have been more efficient, as it was being done in Croatia and Slovenia. But they had to leave the trains shortly before crossing into Austria, and then were further transported by buses. So you can imagine the kind of administrative nightmare to put up to 8,000 people a day into buses, privately rented buses, and to administer the whole transport. So it took a very long time, but still people were patiently waiting, sometimes for 2 or 3 days in this border area. And as you can see, apart from the tents, there's no kind of control infrastructure there at the very beginning of the border crossing. This is still a picture of the very early days. I still remember very well the woman in front, because you can see that she is in a quite of an amount of pain. She wasn't able to communicate with the soldiers standing in front of the group, blocking them from moving further, and the officer was shouting at her to sit down, because their main concern was that people would just stand up and start moving. But she wasn't able to communicate to him, because she was speaking Arabic and he didn't, that she wasn't able to sit down because she had a kidney operation just a brief period before that. So for me, this is still like a symbolic picture of the difficulties people arriving in Spielfeld faced at the border. Big problem was communication, and this is where many activists tried to step in. Some of them living in Austria just for a couple of months themselves, like fellow Syrian and Palestinian and Afghan citizens who joined us at the border to provide translation for those who were arriving. Our initiative was focusing on facilitating other activists to support people in Spielfeld. It was complete chaos. No one knew for a month how to access the border area, where to drop off things, if it was possible to access, under which terms, because situation was changing from day to day, even infrastructure-wise, because sometimes we left in the middle of the night and came back the afternoon after work and couldn't even find the same tents anymore, because they had set up a new tent, a new barricade, so it was a space in permanent transition. What we see from today, from the perspective of today, is that this kind of architecture of control obviously was aimed at a closure of the Balkan corridor, not only with physical methods, but even by implementing control mechanisms of a legal type. So here, this is another picture of October. You see regular fences being set up, how they are used at concerts or sports events, but this then later was even more sophisticated system, with people being blocked on the Slovenian side for a very long time in the so-called no man's land. Some of you might have been experienced yourself, where we were worrying practically each night that people might freeze and die, because temperatures frequently dropped below zero and people were without shelter. But the situation changed in December 2015. Despite very high numbers of people arriving each day, still in the 3,000 to 5,000 people, Spielfeld was completely closed, and all the transport redirected to the western region, to the southwestern region of Carinthia, while in Spielfeld a new system was implemented called border management. It consisted in infrastructure, but more important, it consisted in the kind of institutionalized pushback system, we later witnessed. In order to implement pushbacks, the first thing the authorities were aiming at was to get rid of any human rights monitors. There was a very big solidarity from a local population along the border. It's not very different from the villages you would find on the Slovenian or the Croatian border, just small villages. But despite of the small number of people living in the villages, solidarity was really impressive, and we had people who came directly after work to hand out food or brought clothes they collected themselves. So there were all kinds of people active at the border, not only the classical activists, but people who really had a standing in the local communities, from civil servants or members of community councils, people active in the churches. So in case those people would have witnessed illegal activities, authorities couldn't be sure that there wouldn't be like a direct response. So you saw that before, the infrastructure and the architecture of the border area was very open. With the border management, these kind of banners were set up, hiding even looks from outside the border area into the newly created border management. So the long column of people you see walking here, they were walking on foot, like 300 meters or 400 from the camp on the Slovenian side, where they arrived by train, and then were brought into organized group of 500 people into across the border and into the place we then called a black box, because people simply disappeared from our eyes after we had still the chance to accompany them, walking with them from the Slovenian camp to the entrance of the border management. This is the entrance people disappeared in. You see a picture of February 2016. When we are talking about pushbacks, we are talking about a very, very brief period with an incredibly high number of pushbacks.
This was not exactly pushback, but it was actually a very particular filtration and the closure of the Balkan corridor, right?
Legally, it was a pushback, because this is what helped us challenge the. Legally, it was a pushback. I'm using the term of the Schengen border code, but you are absolutely right. I share your opinion that the attempt of all the tents, all the systems being set up there, and it was an incredibly expensive system. And it's still in place today. I crossed today with Chandra coming from Spielfeld, and we were driving past the same tents that are still set up there, even despite the fact the last person who was processed there came on the 6th of March in 2016. The tents are empty and are there like a monument. So people disappeared from our eyes in these tents. And this is how it looks inside. We didn't see this infrastructure in the first 2 months, not even like the tents we saw were empty. There wasn't even beds to sleep on. It was just like wooden floor. But they set up all the system with the containers, computers, fingerprinting machines in December, and it opened in January. And as you know, at the beginning of March, the corridor was already closed. So they weren't even fast enough to procure all the kind of fancy items they ordered for the border management, because at the end they had even like a wall, an electronic wall at the entrance telling you, like at the airport, how much time it would take you at the moment to be processed by the border authority, and then maybe 15 minutes later you would have access to the toilet and receive some food. So, great kind of reception. But what we see here is actually the inside, and it reminded me like of animal cages. We had the chance to access the whole system when the former Chancellor of Austria, Kurz, decided to have his election campaign right inside these tents after the corridor had been closed by him, as he's always claiming, in 2016. So, how did the organized institutional pushback system in Spielfeld work? You might remember this was the time when people arriving via the corridor already had to carry transit papers in order to cross from one country to the next. This was a period where these kind of transit papers were already standardized, so you would have just one transit paper for all the countries with stamps from each country. Then people arrived in Spielfeld and were first, there was a body search, and we haven't seen this before the establishment of the border system. People just came and even asked, don't I have to be body searched because I might carry a weapon? And they were just saying, move to the buses. So after being body searched, they were asked according to this questionnaire. These were the famous 5 questions. People were asked, short questions, short answers. The whole process didn't take more than 3 minutes. Well, we can ask Ahmed how he responded to these questions. There were 3 different outcomes to the questionnaire, and in order to have a visible sign of the outcome, people were provided with wristbands. You see the yellow wristbands close to the questionnaire. The yellow wristbands signified that he could move on. There were only 2 options moving on, either to be further transported to Germany or to to ask for asylum in Austria. The problematic outcome was if you were provided with a red wristband, as Ahmed. After 3 minutes of questions, you have to imagine that these questions had to be translated and retranslated because the police officers were not able to speak the questions of people arriving. People who were provided a red wristband were detained for hours in a container without food, with restricted access to a toilet. They had to push the door or to bang at the door of the container in order to having an officer open the door and access a toilet. And they were later escorted by Slovenian police officers, sometimes equipped with dogs, scary dogs, as the children told us, and they were accompanied the same route people had been walking down priorly, the same route, the 300 meters leading to the Slovenian camp just opposite the highway bridge. They were then detained in closed tents there before being transported to Postojna. Why do we have these pictures? It was possible to witness the pushbacks each day, sitting in a cafe on the opposite side of the street in the border area. At this day, the pushback was quite late because there was a Norwegian television team present filming inside the border area, so we think that they rather didn't want them to see the actual pushbacks from happening. Pushback lawsuits had to start incredibly fast, because the time you have to challenge a direct police action under Austrian law within the administrative law system is extremely short. People who were pushed back to Postojna and then later brought to different camps in Slovenia obviously had no idea that there was even the chance to challenge the pushback. It was only because we were contacted by an Austrian woman who had a Syrian friend who was waiting for his family to arrive, elderly parents who disappeared from the grid shortly before they entered Austria. So they could give us some indications, and with the help of Slovenian fellow activists, we were able to find the people. And we didn't find only them, but we found dozens of people in different Slovenian camp locations, and they were all fresh from a pushback at the border. So we met them, we talked to them, we informed them about the possibility to challenge the pushback. And what is different from the situation today was that because of the high number of people, because of this kind of organized and meticulously organized pushbacks within this centralized system, it was possible to find 25 people who were ready to challenge the Austrian pushback decision at the same time in Austrian courts. So here you see one, or actually the only person who was able to attend the pushback procedures while they were happening in Graz in the administrative court, because he in the meantime had obtained asylum in Slovenia. And he was able to travel because he received his passport only days before the procedures started. And for him it was a quite emotional moment to come back to the very place where his destiny was being derouted by an Austrian officer who, after 4 sentences of questioning, had decided that he wouldn't be allowed to ask for asylum in Austria. And this is the place in Graz, the Landesverwaltungsgericht, where the procedures were taking place. You can see that we had even for the court procedure, we had a monitoring teams who were reporting from the procedures in order to keep people updated. And to the left, you see what is actually linking pushbacks from then to the pushbacks of today, at least Slovenian pushbacks, because this is part of the Schengen Border Codex. These are the forms provided in the annex of the border code that have to be used when a police officer is formally pushing someone back across the border. The court cases were incredibly successful, like in around 80% of the court cases, despite the fact the plaintiffs weren't allowed to enter Austria, they succeeded. Only based on their written declarations provided by one lawyer. He is one of the best asylum specialists we have in Austria. In case you need to, you could use legal expertise from Austria. The best thing to do is to contact asylanwalt.at. This is a network of legal NGOs and private lawyers promoting high quality asylum representation and are constantly evolving the quality of asylum decision making, which is a rather hard task in Austria, as some of you might know. The colleagues focusing and specialized in asylum law, which is a very tricky area of law because it involves national law, European law, and international agreements, were extremely excited about the outcome of the procedures, because before we didn't have a clear notion as to when a claim of asylum had been issued or uttered by someone who had crossed the border. Even in your cases you're dealing with today, the big question often will be if something should be considered an asylum claim or not. In these cases that were later published in the public law registry, now there is a notion as to whether or not something has to be considered an asylum claim. Problematic in the procedures, what has been revealed by the court was the question of translating. Police were using translators that had no education whatsoever and no clear instruction. So we had translators who gave a quick assessment of the security situation in Afghanistan. So at the pushback form, the police officer would write, doesn't come from an area affected by war at the moment. So there were like instant asylum procedures lasting only 2 seconds based on the information of a non-educated translator. Police made a very, very bad impression at the court hearings. There were questions regarding their instructions, because even the instructors couldn't tell the court as to how people were instructed to ask the questions in the questionnaire. And police officers themselves couldn't explain how and why they had written the comments later appearing on the pushback forms. So, yes, it is possible to challenge pushbacks in the court. The outcome is, you have to be, I mean, it's important to be realistic regarding the outcomes, and I was very grateful to my colleague who, when talking to clients before the start of the procedures, told them that the outcome might not affect their personal lives, but it might affect the lives of people coming after them. And the reason for why I'm very glad that Ahmed is with us today is that Ahmed took this challenge despite knowing that he might have no personal benefit, and he didn't, because now, years after being pushed back in Spielfeld, he still has, he's still alone without his family, while he was telling us how much he was in fear for the safety of his family who stayed in Syria. So I wanted to just ask if there are like immediate questions regarding the procedures. I would be happy to provide you with links to the procedures in case they are useful to you. But otherwise, I would ask Ahmed to describe how he experienced the pushback in Spielfeld.
Dobar dan, ja sam Ahmed Shamieh, sam iz Sirije, star sam 48 let.
My name is Ahmed Shamieh from Syria, 48 years old.
V 2016 pridem skupaj tisoči ljudje v Evropa.
In 2016, I came with thousands of people into Europe.
V vse država zelo mir in čista. In v času pridem v Austrijo, v maja Austrija ima slab brovojalec.
So when he came to Austria in May, there was really bad in February, but he said in Maya? Maya, sorry, okay, yeah. So on the border there was, when he came to Austria on the border, there was a really bad translator.
In brovojalec vprašanje meni, zakaj pride Ahmed v Evropo.
So the translator asked him, why did Ahmed come to Europe?
Jaz govorim, v Sirija ima vojna in tudi ne moram živim v Siriji.
So he said in Syria there is a war and that he cannot live in Syria.
On rekel, policija, gospod, pridi tukaj iz let. Iz let.
Okay. So the police told him, yeah, come here for a trip.
Ja, in potem policija dobi v moja roka kovina in zaklenje dve roka zadaj, isto mafija, in grem v zabor.
So the police cuffed him with iron cuffs and put him in like mafia and put him into jail.
V tu je čas jaz žalosten, skrbi, ker ne vem, kaj govorim. V tu je jezik.
So at that time he was very sad because he didn't know how to speak the language of the land he was in.
In tudi ne moram govorim brovojalec, ker brovojalec mlad, slab, grd, ne govori isto, kaj govorim jaz.
So, and also the translator was really bad and ugly and, if I understand, dishonest. and was not young. He was young and he didn't say what he was saying. So
Živim v Zabor, Austrija in dan, potem pridem v Slovenijo nazaj. Isto živim v Zabor in dan in noč. Pride provajalec arabsko-slovensko.
So he was first in jail in Austria, then he was taken to the Slovenian side and was there in the jail also for 1 day and 1 night, and then another translator came.
Provajalec rekel, kdo podpis babir, begunec v Slovenija, gre ven, živi v Ljubljani, v azilni dom. Kdo ne podpis babir, živi v Zabor.
So then the translator told them who has a signature, who has a refugee status, who has all the papers, can live in Ljubljana, and who doesn't have, he'll have to stay here.
Who will sign, they stay in Ljubljana. Who will sign, they will stay in prison.
Okay.
Jaz govorim, ja, lahko podpis, to je država varna. In rabim, živim v država varna. Ne pomembno Avstrija, Nemčija, Holanda, Amerika, pomembno država varna.
Okay, and he said, for me, it's important to be in a safe country. It doesn't matter if it's America, Netherlands, or Germany, or any country. It's important that it's safe, and for this I have no problem. So I would sign this paper that you require.
In potem podpis babir, grem živim v azilni dom v Ljubljani, v Kotnikovi, 5 mesecev.
So he signs the paper and then he goes to live to Ljubljana, to Kotnikova, which is an asylum home, and he stayed there for 5 months.
Potem dobim babir v azilni dom, Ahmed, ti ne moraš živiš v Sloveniji, jutri greš v Hrvaško.
So and then one day he gets a paper where it says that Ahmed, you cannot live in Slovenia. Tomorrow you're going to be deported to Croatia.
V tu je čas, jaz govorim, lahko MNZ, govori Ahmed, ne moraš živiš v Sloveniji v prvi dan, prvi teden, ampak ne bo čaka 5 mesecev. MNZ v prvi minuta ve, kdo Ahmed, kaj dela Ahmed, iz kateri država Ahmed.
So, if I understand correctly, is that they had the first day, the first week to tell him that Ahmed cannot live there. The Ministry for Interior Affairs could have said it, but not after 5 months, after he made practically a life there, and he was constantly, they had time to notify him, but nothing happened. And then after 5 months, after nothing, they just tell him, you have to go tomorrow to Croatia.
V tu je čas, moja prijateljica iz Avstrije, ona vprašanje meni, Ahmed, kaj dobiš v ograja Avstrija? Jaz govorim, kaj dobim, kaj dela provajalec. Ona rekla, moja odvetnik, lahko ti podpis papir, on piše pritožba, ker provajalec in policija dela narobe.
So a friend from Austria asked him what did he sign while he was behind the fence, probably in detention in Austria. And then he told her, and then she told him that she can get a lawyer for him, and they can make pritožba. They can make an appeal to the court with a lawyer.
In potem malo čas, moja odvetnik v Avstriji piše pritožba, sodnik vidi moja pritožba in rekel, provajalec in policija dela narobe. Tu je ne bo zakon in bridi brovojalec, bridi policija vi sodišče, ker sodnik rabi obrošanje.
So then the lawyer checked what was signed and told him that what the translator did is not okay. So then if I understand, the judge invited after the appeal, after the whole thing went to court, the judge invited the translator into court.
Potem v čas sodnik obrošanje brovojalec in policija rekel, Ahmed ne pridi tukaj v Avstrija, on podpis papir begunec v Slovenija. Tukaj nič vidi Ahmed. Brovojalec in policija in prvi sodnik obrošanje brovojalec in policija, zakaj ti delaš ne bo zakon, ti ne sodnik, ti ne minister, ne moraš govoriš in ljudje greš nazaj. Tu je sodnik govori.
So what the judge said to the translator and to the police is that it is not for them to decide if somebody can get access to asylum and entry into the state or not. I mean, to asylum or not, and yeah.
Brovojalec in policija rekel, Ahmed ne pridi tukaj. Podpis papir v Slovenija. Podpis papir begunec v Slovenija, ne pridi v Avstrija.
So then the police and the translator said that Ahmed was not in Austria, that he signed the paper in Slovenia.
In moja odvetnik pokliče meni, on rekel, imaš papir v Avstrija, jaz govorim, ja, imam moja pasport, ima podpis država in dela gor X. On rekel, daj mi slika. On dobi tu je slika in potem sodnik vidi slika moja pasport.
Then his lawyer asked him if he has any proof of being in Austria, and tvoj pasoš.
Yeah.
And so he had some kind of a mark from the state or from probably the border authorities that in his passport that he was in fact in Austria. So he gave it to the lawyer and.
V čas sodnik vidi slika, on rekel, brovojalec in policija laž, dela narobe, dela ne bo zakon, dobi kazen.
So after the judge saw his the proof of him being in Austria, he told to the police and the translator that they are lying, and they got a fine.
In sodnik rekel, Ahmed, ti begunec v Avstrija, ne v Slovenija, pridi.
And the judge said, Ahmed, you are a refugee in Austria and not in Slovenia, so come.
Jaz govorim, rabim papir, ker ne rabim grem po noči, rabim grem v dan, v čas vidim policija v vlak, v avtobus in govorim, izvoli, imam papir sodnik, ne strah, ne skrbi.
So he asked the judge if he can give him a paper, so because he would like to travel normally to Austria during the day, not to be scared, so to travel legally and to give to the border control something that shows that he has the right to stay in Austria.
In sodnik podpis papir, ker jaz grem v Avstrija, tu je papir, ima čas 14 dni.
So the judge gave him a paper which had a time frame of 40 days to arrive to Austria.
V azilni dom dobi tu je papir in potem v azilni dom dela, dobi papir v predal 3 meseci.
So the asylum home got the paper from the judge, and the people who got the paper in the asylum home put it in a drawer for 3 months.
Konec 3 meseci, rekel v azilni dom, Ahmed, izvoliti, imaš papir, sodnik Avstrija.
And after 3 months, they gave him the paper in the asylum home and said, here's from the judge in Austria.
Moja prijatelj bere tu je papir, ker jaz ne razumem tu je jezik. On rekel, Ahmed, Ti imaš, tu je papir za Austrijo. Moja, ja.
Yeah, just a friend read it to him and translated the paper.
In tudi isto prijatelj pokliče moja odvetnik v Avstriji.
And he calls the lawyer in Austria.
Odvetnik v Avstriji je rekel, Ahmed ima tu je papir pred 3 meseci, tu je papir dela 14 dni.
And the lawyer said to him, yeah, it was valid for 14 days and now it's 3 months over.
Konec 14 dni, tu je papir stran.
So it's not valid anymore.
Ja. In potem tukaj podpis papir, pritožba, ne moram, grem nazaj v Hrvaško, rabim, živim tukaj. V Sloveniji. Pišem podpis papir, pritožba, ne rabim, grem nazaj v Hrvaško, rabim, živim v Sloveniji.
And then he did an appeal that he would want to stay in Slovenia and not go back to Croatia.
In potem bo čakam 2 let in bo. Ja. In bo čakam 2 let in bo. In potem dobim, zdaj nova dobim 3 leta, živim v Sloveniji.
Okay, so 2 leti in pol.
Bo čakam 2 let in bo.
In zdaj živiš.
Zdaj dobim 3 leta v Sloveniji živim.
Okay, so then he waited for 2 years and a half and then got a paper to be able to stay here for 3 years.
Ja, jaz žalosten v velike stvari. Begunec, jaz zakaj pridem v Evropo? Ker v moja država vojna. Ne moram živim v Siriji.
So he said he's sad because he comes here to Europe because in his country in Syria it's war and he cannot live there.
Zakaj jaz živim v Zabor, isto mafija? Zakaj jaz živim v Zabor, isto mafija?
Yeah, why does he have to live in a jail just as he would be mafia?
Jaz rad država mir, rad živim v mir, rad vse ljudje živijo v mir.
He likes peace, he wants a country to be in peace and he wants for all people to live in peace.
Tudi zelo žalosten, ker moja družina v 4 država.
He is also very sad because his family is in 4 countries, 4 different countries.
3 hčerka in žena v Siriji.
3 daughters and one wife in Syria.
Moj sin v Turčiji.
His son in Turkey.
Moja hčerka v Nemčiji.
His daughter in Germany.
Jaz živim v Sloveniji.
He is in Slovenia.
Ne jaz delam vojna v Siriji.
He is not making war in Syria.
Zakaj jaz dobim tuje življenje zelo težko? Zakaj? Ne jaz delam vojna. Zakaj jaz dobim težko v tuje življenje?
So yeah, why is it that even though he is not making war, it is so hard for him to get a normal, a good life somewhere else?
Zdaj moja družina, ne vidim moja družina 4 leta.
He hasn't seen his family for 4 years.
In tudi ne vem, kdaj lahko vidim družina.
And he doesn't know where he can see them again.
Ali lahko vidim, ali no, ne.
If he can even see them at all.
Ker zdaj počakam odgovor MNZ.
Because now he's waiting for the answer from the Ministry of Interior Affairs.
Lahko MNZ govori, lahko pridi moja družina, lahko govori, ne mora pridi
Maybe
družina.
the Ministry of Interior Affairs will say that the family can join him or that they can't.
Ja. In tudi zakaj mlad, slab, igra v duša ljudje. Isto on brovojalec. On mlad, on igra v moje življenje. Včas on govori slab, ne isto, kaj govorim jaz, to je igra v moje življenje
Prevajalec tukaj v Sloveniji.
v Austriji.
So why did the translator in Austria, why does he play with his life? He's a young man who is playing with his life. How can he do it?
Zdaj veliki ljudje, velik, ne vse, ampak velik, vidi begunec isto žoga.
So a lot of people now see refugees as if they were some kind of a ball.
Brovojalec dobi, tu je žoga 5 minut.
So the translator gets the ball for 5 minutes.
In potem dobi vinoga, žoga za drugi človek. Izvoli igra.
And then he kicks the ball to somebody else's leg and say, okay, here, play with the ball for another.
Ja, tu je res. Vse igra v begunec isto nogomet.
So playing with refugees is like football.
Ja, jaz rabim, razumem in stvari. Včas jaz kuham kavo, pijem kavo.
Sometimes when he cooks coffee, he drinks coffee.
Ja, danes vidim ljudje dela za meni super. Jutri on dobi super. Danes.
Yeah. So today, if he's doing good stuff, tomorrow,
Danes dobim pomaga za malo ljudje. Jutri, danes ni konec življenja. Jutri lahko jaz nazaj tu je pomaga.
So today, a lot of people help him, and tomorrow is not the end of all time and life, so he can help others, and there's a certain reciprocity to the whole deal.
Pred 2 leti in bo, jaz nimam dinar, nimam cigaret, nimam nič.
So 2 years and a half, he didn't have money, cigarettes, or nothing. But now we have to leave.
Ja, 3 minute. In vidim moja prijateljica, ona rekla, in tu je čas, nemam nič, in kadim listi drevo. Dobim listi drevo, kadim listi
So
drevo.
2 months, 2 years, he didn't have money, cigarettes, nothing, and he didn't get nothing, so he smoked leaves from the tree.
Ja, vidim in prijateljica, mlada, prijazna, ona rekla, Ahmed, kaj rabiš?
So there's this friend of his, he was young and nice, and she asked him, Ahmed, what do you need?
Jaz govorim, ne rabim jem riba, rabim učim, kako dobim riba.
So, he said, he told her that he doesn't need to get fish. He needs to find out how he can catch fish by himself.
Ona rekla, kaj rabiš, Ahmed? Jaz govorim, rabim mašin za strižem lasje.
So she asked him, what do you need, Ahmed? And he said, I need a machine to cut hair.
Ona rekla, ja, lahko dobiš. Ona kupi, tu je mašin, jaz dobim, tu je mašin, darilo, in potem strižem lasje ljudje v azilni dom.
So she gives him the machine as a gift, and then he does haircuts in the asylum home.
Dobim €1, €2, kupim tobak.
Gets €1, €2, and buys tobacco.
Tu je čas, učim, kako dobim riba. Ne bo čakam riba za tebi, vsak dan rabim riba.
So he waits to learn how to catch a fish and does not necessarily need every day to get loads of fish and fish and fish.
Ja, tu je moja življenje v Evropi.
Yes, that is his life in Europe.
Počakaj. Jaz pridem v Evropa, nemam očala, danes imam dve očala. Pridem v Evropa, imam original zubje, danes imam nova zubje.
When he came to Europe, he didn't have glasses, now he has two. Before he had teeth, now he has new teeth.
Mogoče naslednji let rabim nova Ahmad.
Maybe next year he needs a new Ahmed.
Ja, moja prijatelj dela v tovarna v Kitajska. Ja,
Okay, his friend is working in a factory in China.
On lahko dela nova Ahmad kmalu.
Maybe he can make a new Ahmed soon.
In tudi, tu je majhna šal in potem konec. Včeraj kupim klobuk in včeraj zelo vroče in delam, dobim zrak, hitro klobuk ne dela, danes dobim nova. In zdaj dela klobuk, ne dela očala.
So yeah, yesterday he got a hat, but then he tried getting himself cold with him, but it didn't work, so he bought a new hat and now it works.
Najlepša hvala in lep dan, nasvidenje, se vidimo, lahko noč, adijo.
Thank you very much, Ahmed and Petra. We're again off schedule, and as mentioned, we also have a special guest, Usha from PITS for the Legal Informative Center, and she will share some insight in how these procedures work and what are the challenges of legal representation. Thank you.
Hello, thank you for the invitation. My name is Urša Riguar. I come from Legal Informational Center for NGOs, shortly called PITS. So we are a non-governmental organization, and we have an asylum division from 2007. And part of our activities is also that we represent asylum seekers in procedures before the ministry when they apply for international protection in Slovenia. However, today I will not speak about all of our activities, but I will focus on the activities regarding the pushback on the Slovenian borders. A lot was said about the pushbacks today, so I will focus on the legal part and what we found out during our activities. So, as it was said today, last year in May, the number of asylum seekers in Slovenia increasingly dropped very fast, and that accompanied with the reports from the media that violations are being done in the border by the police, led us to believe that something is very wrong. So we decided in June 2018 to go to Velika Kladuša and Bihać to see if these kind of reports are founded or if maybe something else is going on. In June 2018, we went to Velika Kladuša and Bihać, and we conducted several interviews with persons living there. And based on those interviews, we prepared a report regarding the activities on the Slovenian borders. During our interviews, we found out that people who are in Velika Kladuša and Bihać had been on the Slovenian borders at least once or maybe even several times, had by their claims applied for asylum or tried to apply for asylum, but were none of the less returned to Croatia, and subsequently, then later from Croatia, returned to Bosnia and Herzegovina. So what we found out was that on the Slovenian border, when people came through the Croatian border, when they were catched by the police, they were processed in the so-called informal procedure of return. That is a procedure that is based on the readmission agreement between Slovenia and Croatia. And in that procedure, here is where the first difference comes between pushbacks from Slovenia to Croatia and then from Croatia to Bosnia. In the Slovenian procedure, people were still officially processed, which means that their basic information were taken, the route was taken, and in that procedure at the police, people mostly expressed their wish to claim asylum in Slovenia. However, in those procedures, they had not had an interpreter, or as we saw from the interviews, there was indication that even if they had the interpreter, the interpreter itself was problematic, the interpretation of the procedure, because they felt that the interpreters either did not interpret what they wanted, gave them false information, or even overheard what they really were trying to say. In that informal procedure, documentation is made, but only basic documentation. Basically, the documentation in the police procedure because people illegally crossed the border, which meant that people got a note from the police that they have to pay a fine because they illegally crossed the border. However, you have to know something about the Slovenian law. In the instance that someone in the border expresses the intention to apply for international protection, in that moment, they should be processed in a so-called registration procedure, which means that the police has to make a procedure about their path, about their basic information, and after the procedure, they need to take them to the asylum home in Ljubljana. So this is where the first violation of the law happened, where I sometimes joke, you know, people came, they asked for asylum, they said azil, azil in Slovenian or in English, and instead of the police processing them, they just said, aha, no, 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 Brazil, Brazil, no, this is Slovenia, just go back to Croatia. Which is the problem which occurred very fast. The trend occurred in May and then, of course, continued until now. The first legal problem was that the persons in the procedure claimed that they were not properly informed about their right to asylum. Because we need to understand that the word asylum, it's not a magical word that opens all the doors for you to the country. This is just one of the words you can use to claim asylum. But according to the procedural directive, in the moment that you express some kind of form which indicates that you need protection, the police have the obligation to inform you about your right to asylum. Because we need to understand that not all the people know that they have to say asylum. Some just say, I am from Syria and in Syria there is war. And that should be enough of indication for the police by law to say, okay, do you maybe need international protection, or do you at least know what international protection is? During the preparation of our report, we looked at the documentation that was prepared in the police procedures in Slovenia, and we saw that the documents themselves were contradictory. So you have a person who claims that in the same documents it says that this is the person from Syria, he is escaping his country because of war in his country, however he did not claim asylum, he is an economical migrant. How, in those documentation that we saw that the migrants had in Velika Kladuša and Bihać, it was not evident from that documentation that the police made their duty, that they informed the people that they have the right to asylum, nor did they even write down that if the person actually expressed the asylum or not. So after the police procedure, in which there was no interpretation, there was no lawyer present, they did not get any information about the asylum, people were returned back to Croatia based on readmission agreement. Here we have to question more things. First of all, it's the legality of the essence of the agreement, because based on the agreement, people do not have the right to appeal, because this is an informal procedure, and also the legality of the agreement itself, because the agreement was made by Croatia and Slovenia before Croatia entered the European Union, and the European Union, the legality of the whole agreement is questionable, since readmission agreements can be made, but only between EU countries and third countries, so not EU countries. But now Croatia is an EU country, so the whole legality of the agreement is very questionable. People were later, so they were pushed back to the Croatian police, and here is the difference, that the Croatian police actually got the people physically. However, based on the interviews, we found out that they did not process them in any kind of formal way. They were directly transferred to the Bosnian border, where they were, most of them were beaten and their telephones were taken, the same things that our colleagues were speaking about before. And here the difference is that Croatia and Bosnia also have a readmission agreement. However, here people were pushed back without any kind of informal or formal procedure, meaning that they were just brought to the border, and then the police started shouting, "Go, go, go," beat them, and they had to cross their borders, the borders themselves. So no Bosnian authorities ever contact them. They didn't wait for them at the border, nothing. By the statement of people, the Bosnian authorities didn't even know that they were going to be returned to Bosnia. And what I want to acknowledge is not just the pushbacks, but also we need to also look at the conditions in which people are living after they are pushed back to Bosnia, because I think this is a very important element of the pushback. In our opinion, we were there in Bosnia in June 2018, and the conditions then were very much different from the conditions now. However, now they're also terrible, as your colleagues have told us. And in our opinion, the conditions violate the third Article 3 of the European Convention of Human Rights, because they pass the threshold of inhumane and degrading treatment. People there do not have proper reception conditions. They do not have access to the asylum procedure, because we know that Bosnia does not have enough of reception facilities, nor do they have access to nor do they have a functioning asylum procedure. And we need to think about the responsibility of Slovenia for indirect pushback, not just the direct pushback to Croatia, but also the indirect pushback to Bosnia, and the conditions in which people there live. And I think this is one of the important elements, because we need to realize that Bosnia at this point does not have the capacity to take care of all of these people. And before the conditions will be normal enough to Bosnia to accept all of those people, it will be quite some time. So therefore, people will be forced to enter how they call the game again and again. Their human rights will be violated again and again until they are accepted in one of the countries, EU countries, let's say like this. We also need to know, we hear in the media a lot of times how these are economic migrants. They don't want to apply for asylum in the Balkan countries, but we need to understand that during the Balkan route, more or less, Slovenia was the first country in which they could effectively apply for asylum. Greece, as you know, has an unfunctioning system, and then followed by Bosnia and Serbia, and also in Croatia, where violation happened, and access to asylum is also being stopped. Slovenia, until June 2018, for them was the first country in which they could officially claim asylum effectively. Of course, the trend shows that this has stopped. The numbers, as you saw before, are dropping. And I think it's important to, when we speak about the pushbacks, on the Balkan route, I think it's very important that we also think about the broader picture, that we are not an isolated incident in this case. If you look at the trend in the European Union, then you see that the pushbacks are happening more or less in every country. If you look at how the European Union is addressing these topics, then you can see that they are pushing the migration agenda in a way that would close the borders even more. More and more money is being granted for border protection. The national legislations are being stricter and stricter, including the one in Slovenia. Or we need to not forget that there were quite a few attempts to change the Slovenian legislation in the past 2 years in a way that would be in breach with the Convention of Convention of Refugees and other important legislation in this field. And we also need to realize that more and more the organizations working on this field, including you and including me, are being criminalized for their paths, for what they're doing, for their projects. So we need to think in this context how, not just on the Balkan route, but how on the whole European Union level, how we can strengthen our cooperation in order to try to prevent the legislation and our decision makers to put more restrictions on the people who are fleeing war and persecution. And also to always realize that this is right now become a numbers game, meaning that if you look at the statistic in the European Union, the number of asylum seekers is dropping. However, we make it seem like we're in a new crisis. So therefore, I think it's important that we all try to find a strategic way how to tackle these issues before it's too late if it's not already. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your. This is actually also a kind of semi-legal issue that appeared. I don't know where is Ahmed, but okay. Petra, 14th of February 2016, in the morning, we got an internal news saying new questionnaire was introduced into entering point in Dobova, Slovenia. So they came from Dobova and then they went to Spielfeld. So this was the route through Slovenia. Why do you want to go to Germany? And they offered you 5 answers, please. War, study, religious reasons, family reunification, job. If you choose war, you go to Germany or Austria. Otherwise, they send you back to Croatia. This started today. This was an SMS I received in the morning. So this was the SMS, right? So at the same night, the official news, they said the same. So this was the moment when Ahmed was among the people, and these selective filtered questionnaires were introduced Croatia, Slovenia, and Austria. And I believe that his young translator somehow mixed things up, you know? Maybe he said, yes, there is a war in my country, but I want to enjoy my life now in safety. So this was very, because we heard a lot of cases that people said, yes, there is a war in my country, but I want to study, I want to live forward, right? And they were moved back because they said a few things more. So this was really like very often going on during this selective CIA nationals.
If I can comment?
Yeah.
In that context, what you said, 2 things are very important to know. The first was that the whole Balkan route was very well organized by the EU authorities, if I dare say, and that, of course, all the countries sooner or later use the same process, the same strategic processes to deter people from entering the country. So first, in Slovenia, it was, okay, we only accept Iranians, Syrians, and Afghan people, and then the second phase was, now they have to put out these questionnaires. And that was something that like all the countries did. It went like a puzzle from the beginning to the end. And the second thing is regarding the questionnaire. The questionnaire is just one of those things that shows that the authorities still do not manage to comprehend completely the push and pull factors of people. So why do they leave the country? Why they are pushed from the country and go to another country? And why they are pulled to one of the specific countries. It can be of various reasons. It can be family, it can be also education, it can be the fact that your diaspora lives there, it can be reception conditions, it can be a variety of reasons why they go there. And I think that, you know, this kind of questionnaire was intentionally put in a way that would not even consider all of the reasons why people flee. It was meant to be like a whole sito, I don't know how to say, that just leaves a few stones out, but the majority stay in the bottle and are then tossed aside.
Thanks, Aigul, for this really important contribution. We did know about the Dobova questionnaire so quickly because while the corridor was open, the cooperation between different activists on the ground was already working that well on the route. What we later found out via the court procedures was that the Dobova questionnaire originated in a police coordination document signed by the heads of state security of 4 different countries on the 18th of February in 2016. And here we are entering a level that hasn't been addressed so far. Because we are talking about our national authorities, mainly ministries of interior or army, and we are talking about the EU. And when we're talking about the EU, this tends to become a bit fuzzy, like this big body who is deciding. We don't know it's the EU. But there is, and this was very visible for us during the days of the open corridor, there is something on the national level that we regularly aren't able to perceive. There is a bilateral or multilateral cooperation on the level of security authorities, ministries of interior, in that case of this unique document that has been published by IOSerious, the police coordinating document of 18th of February of 2016, we had the signatures of all security officers, the highest security officers of the states under the document that implemented the Dobova questionnaire and that implemented the legal mechanisms to close the corridor. So this is something we are not able to access anymore because the corridor is closed. Police cooperation now tends to be under the radar of journalists, ombudsmen, and so. But I guess it's still continuing, and that's why I'm always wondering, while now in Austria we have different procedures, would be very much interesting to hear if there are people surfacing in Slovenia that have been pushed back on the Austrian borders we're not even aware about. But now it seems that everything is back to normal and decisions are taken on the national level, but I can't believe it, and I guess especially Austria and Germany are playing a much bigger role on the Balkans than we are perceiving it nowadays.
Yes, so regarding the pushback from Austria, our information comes mostly that people try to avoid Austria at any cost, going through the route to Italy. And then if they're apprehended there by the Italian police, then they are returned back to Croatia through Slovenia. One thing that is very questionable is that you have to understand that when the person arrives, applies for asylum in Slovenia, they have to fill, before they lodge the application, they have to fill up a form in which they agree that in case they will leave the asylum home and are apprehended by the police, so if they try to flee away, they will be processed as aliens, not as asylum seekers, meaning that you can return them via the readmission to Croatia. So this means that people who are apprehended at the Italian border or then just by readmissions, they don't come through Ljubljana, they just come to Croatia if all the procedures can apply. I think that we also have cases coming from the Austrian borders. However, because those cases are so few, it's so much more difficult to see the statistic how many people are actually the ones coming from Austria. Also, the route has changed through Italy, so. But it would be, yes, it would be something that is also worth monitoring closely.